Hey guys, tonight we're going to get cozy, settle into bed, and explore, well, how people used to get cozy and settle into bed, but about 1,000 years ago. We're journeying back to the Middle Ages to look at the weird, wonderful, and frankly often uncomfortable sleep habits of medieval people. Forget your memory foam mattress and your climate-controlled room for a moment. Instead, picture a lumpy straw mattress that you share with 3 other people and a few hundred bedbugs, in a room where the only light is a flickering, smelly candle and the only sound is the wind howling outside. The very idea of a quiet, private 8-hour block of uninterrupted sleep would have seemed like a wild fantasy. You probably wouldn't survive the night, at least not without waking up convinced the house was haunted, infested, or both. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to see where you're listening from, so drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The last sliver of the sun disappears below the horizon, and the world outside your small timber-framed house transforms. The familiar landscape of fields and forests melts away, swallowed by an advancing tide of darkness. This isn't the gentle, dusky twilight of the modern world, where the glow of streetlights and distant cities holds the true night at bay. This is a profound and absolute blackness, a deep, velvety, and often intimidating void that fundamentally changes your relationship with the world. Your modern concept of nighttime is about to dissolve. As the light fails, a sense of urgency ripples through your small village or town. This is the time to get indoors. You join the general retreat from the outdoors, securing the heavy wooden door to your dwelling with a thick iron bar. The wooden shutters are closed and latched, not just against the evening chill, but against the night itself. The world outside is no longer yours. It now belongs to things that thrive in the dark, both real and imagined. You reach for the light switch on the wall, only to remember that light switches won't be invented for another 700 years, and neither will walls that are smooth enough to put one on. Your only weapon against this immense darkness is fire. The central hearth, which cooked your meager evening meal, provides the primary source of light. Its flickering orange glow dances across the rough-hewn walls of the single room that serves as your kitchen, living room, and bedroom. It's a warm, hypnotic light, but it's weak, casting long, monstrous shadows that seem to writhe and twist in the corners of the room. This feeble glow might be supplemented by an even more pathetic source of light, a quirky but common feature of poorer medieval homes, the rushlight. You might have spent part of your afternoon making one, soaking the pithy core of a rush plant in leftover animal fat or kitchen grease. When lit, it produces a smoky, sputtering, and profoundly smelly light, burning for maybe 20 minutes before it gutters out. The rushlight gives off a romantic glow. If your idea of romance is the smell of burning animal fat and a constant nagging fear of setting your own face on fire, sometime after sunset, you hear the distant ringing of a bell from the local church or town tower. This is the curfew. As a mainstream historical fact, the curfew bell from the Old French couvre-feu, meaning cover fire, was a signal to the community that the day was officially over. It was time to damp down your hearth fire, covering the embers with ash to keep them safe until morning, and to extinguish any remaining candles. This was less about enforcing a bedtime and more about fire prevention, a constant and terrifying hazard in a world built of wood and thatch. With the fire damped down to a dull red glow, the darkness inside becomes almost as complete as the darkness outside. You are now in the heart of the medieval night. The evening's entertainment consists of staring into the dying embers and trying not to think about the legions of things that might be hiding just beyond your barred door. It's character building. What did this profound darkness do to the medieval psyche? Historians still argue whether the medieval perception of night was one of universal, paralyzing fear of the unknown, or if people were simply more accustomed to the deep darkness, possessing a different set of sensory skills, a sharper sense of hearing, a better memory for navigating by touch that we, in our brightly lit world, have since lost. Huddled in your small home, you listen to the sounds of the night. The moan of the wind, the distant howl of a dog or a wolf, the creak of the house's timbers settling, the scuttling of mice in the walls. Every sound is magnified. Every silence feels heavy with unspoken possibilities. You are in a tiny, fragile bubble of human warmth, surrounded by an ocean of cold, silent, and mysterious blackness. It is in this environment, so alien to our own, that you must prepare for sleep. And as you will soon discover, the way you sleep will be just as strange and unfamiliar as the darkness that now surrounds you. Huddled in the near-total darkness of your medieval home, with the fire banked and the shutters latched, your body naturally begins to wind down. The day's hard labor has left your muscles weary, and the lack of any light stimulation other than the dull red glow of the hearth embers tells your brain it's time to rest. You feel your eyelids grow heavy. Sleep comes easily, a welcome blanket pulling you down into a deep, dreamless state. You are not aiming for a full 8 hours. In fact, you're not even thinking about it. Your goal is simply to get through the first part of the night. This is the riddle of medieval slumber. Sleeping through the night is not the goal, because the night is something to be tackled in shifts. A few hours pass. The moon, if there is one, has climbed higher in the sky. The profound silence of the sleeping village is broken only by the hoot of an owl or the distant cry of a fox. And then, as naturally as you fell asleep, you begin to stir. Your consciousness floats back to the surface, not with a jolt or a gasp, but with a gentle, peaceful return. You open your eyes. It is still profoundly dark, but you feel calm, rested. Even you sit up, your mind surprisingly clear and alert. You might glance at the embers or through a crack in the shutters at the stars outside. It's sometime around midnight. Your modern instinct is to panic. Waking up at 1 a.m. with a clear head, that's a recipe for a night of anxious tossing and turning, worrying about your mortgage, your job, and that embarrassing thing you said in a meeting 3 years ago. You'd reach for your phone, scroll through social media, or maybe just lie there, cursing your insomnia. But you remember, phones and email won't exist for centuries. The only thing to worry about is demon. And more pressingly, you realize waking in the middle of the night is not a disorder. It's the plan. You have just completed your first sleep, or as the French would call it, your première somme. This is the mainstream historical fact that completely changes our understanding of pre-modern rest, brought to popular attention by the work of historian A. Roger Ekirch. For centuries, right up until the Industrial Revolution, the vast majority of Western society slept in two distinct phases. This wasn't a strange quirk. It was the universally accepted default way of sleeping. References to first sleep and second sleep are found everywhere in historical documents, from personal diaries and medical textbooks to court records and famous works of literature. A character in Chaucer might go to bed after his first sleep. A doctor might advise a patient to take a particular medicine between the two sleeps. It was as normal and unremarkable as us talking about lunch or dinner. It's called first sleep, which of course implies a sequel, and just like most sequels, the second part is probably not as good and you're a bit more tired during it. After this first deep slumber, you would enter a period of quiet wakefulness lasting for an hour, maybe two. This interval, sometimes called the watch, was not seen as a frustrating bout of insomnia. It was a useful, even valued part of the night. It was a time for quiet contemplation, for prayer, for intimacy, or even for light chores that could be done by the faint glow of the embers. Even their sleep had an intermission. It's the kind of productivity hacking that modern lifestyle gurus can only dream of. Why did people sleep this way? The primary reason is the one that surrounds you now, the long, oppressive, and all-encompassing darkness. In winter, the night could last for 14, 15, even 16 hours. It is simply unnatural for a human to sleep soundly for that entire duration. Our modern, consolidated 8-hour block of monophasic sleep is a relatively recent invention, a forced adaptation to the artificial light of the industrial age, which allowed us to push our bedtimes later and artificially shorten the night. The biphasic sleep pattern you're now experiencing is likely the more natural ancestral rhythm of human rest. Historians still argue whether this biphasic sleep pattern was a purely biological response to the natural light-dark cycle, a rhythm our bodies fall into when not governed by electric lights and alarm clocks, or if it was also a culturally reinforced habit, with the waking watch becoming a valued and protected time for specific social and spiritual activities that were gradually squeezed out by modernity. So, here you are, awake in the dead of night, your mind clear and your body rested from its first sleep. The profound silence of your medieval home is broken only by the soft breathing of others nearby and the occasional sigh of the wind outside. The embers in the hearth provide just enough of a dull red glow to make the darkness feel less absolute. The question is, what do you do now in this strange and awkward hour between sleeps? The answer is pretty much anything, as long as you can do it quietly and in the dark. This period of nocturnal wakefulness, often called the watch or the waking watch, was not wasted time. It was a normal and accepted part of the daily, or rather, nightly routine, and it was filled with a surprising variety of activities. For many, this was primarily a time for spiritual reflection. The quiet and solitude of the midnight hour were considered uniquely suited for prayer and meditation. In a life full of hard labor and little privacy, this was a precious, guaranteed interval for connecting with God. You might use this time to recite prayers you know by heart, like the Paternoster or the Ave Maria, your lips moving silently in the dark. You could contemplate the state of your soul, mull over your sins from the day past, and pray for protection from the many dangers, both physical and spiritual, that the night was thought to hold. But it wasn't all solemn contemplation. The watch was also a practical time. You might get up from your bed, moving carefully by the faint glow of the embers. Perhaps you check on a sleeping child, adjusting their blanket. You might need to stoke the fire, carefully nudging the logs to ensure the embers will last until morning, so you don't have to go through the arduous process of relighting it from scratch. It's the perfect time to catch up on some work without interruptions, assuming your work involves darning a sock by feel or silently sharpening a tool for the morning's chores. For a woman, it might be a time to do some mending, or for a farmer, a quiet moment to mentally plan out the next day's ploughing. And then there was the social aspect. Remember, you are almost certainly not sleeping alone. We'll get to the crowded nature of the medieval bed later, but for now, just know that your spouse, your children, and maybe a few assorted relatives or servants are all huddled nearby. This waking period was an opportunity for quiet, intimate conversation with your bedfellows. You could whisper about village gossip, discuss family matters, or share anxieties in the dark, a level of privacy that was impossible during the loud communal chaos of the day. This leads to what was, according to many historical sources, one of the most popular activities of the waking watch. As a mainstream historical fact, domestic and medical guidebooks from the era often cited the time after the first sleep as the ideal moment for marital intimacy. Physicians argued that couples would be more rested and energetic than they were at the end of a long, exhausting day, and that conceptions that occurred during this time were more likely to be successful. It was considered the best time for a romantic interlude, offering a level of privacy that's only possible when your snoring in-laws are sleeping 2 feet away. For the small literate elite nobles, merchants, and high-ranking clergy, this was a golden opportunity for intellectual pursuits. With the household quiet, a scholar could light an expensive beeswax candle and spend an hour reading, writing letters, or studying texts without the constant interruptions of a busy day. Many diaries and letters from the period were composed during this productive, peaceful interlude. The very nature of this waking period is a subject of discussion. Historians still argue whether the productivity of the waking watch, the chores, prayers, and social interactions is an overstatement based on evidence from the literate elite, who were the most likely to write things down, or if this was a genuinely useful and common practice across all social classes, including the peasantry who lived a life dictated by physical exhaustion. There was also a supernatural dimension to this time. As a quirky tidbit, many people believed that the veil between the human world and the spiritual world was at its thinnest during this midnight hour. This made it a powerful time for prayer, but also a dangerous time for demonic temptation. Furthermore, it was widely believed that dreams experienced during the second sleep were more significant, clearer, and more likely to be prophetic than dreams from the first, deeper sleep. The waking period was a sort of mental palate cleanser. before receiving these more important nocturnal visions. So you have your options. Your choices for the next hour or so are pray, poke the fire, do some mending, or have a quiet, hushed conversation about the price of hay with the 6 other people in your bed. The nightlife is wild. After an hour or so of your chosen activity, a natural wave of drowsiness would begin to wash over you again. Your body, having had its brief respite, would be ready for its second sleep. You would lie back down, pull your woolen blanket up to your chin, and drift off once more, hopefully to have some very meaningful dreams about a good harvest. As the natural drowsiness for your second sleep begins to settle over you, you lie back down in the darkness. You shift slightly to get comfortable, and in doing so, your arm brushes against another warm body. On your other side, a small foot kicks you gently in the ribs. You are not alone, not even close. You are about to drift off to sleep in a medieval bed, which means you are preparing to share your bed with family and quite possibly with strangers. The modern concept of a private bedroom as a personal sanctuary is a luxury that simply does not exist for you. Your bed is a public space. In your small peasant hovel, this is a matter of pure necessity. Your family, you, your spouse, and your 3 or 4 children likely owns only one bed, if you can even call it that. It might be a simple wooden frame, or more likely just a large mattress sack on the floor in the corner of your single-room home. To sleep separately would be to freeze. You all pile in together, a tangle of limbs under a shared woolen blanket, conserving precious body heat against the biting cold of the night. Your personal space is whatever is not currently occupied by your spouse, your 3 children, a visiting cousin, and the large dog who thinks he's people. But this practice was not confined to the poor. In a wealthy merchant's house or a nobleman's castle, the master bed was the most important and expensive piece of furniture in the entire household. It was a massive 4-poster affair, ornately carved and hung with heavy insulating curtains. It was a potent symbol of status and wealth, and it was often located not in a private bedroom, but in the great hall or a semi-private chamber called a sola, where it could be seen and admired. And it too was frequently shared. The lord and lady of the house would sleep there, of course, but their young children would often join them. A high-ranking or favored guest might be given the great honor of sleeping in the bed with their host. Personal servants and attendants didn't sleep in separate quarters down the hall. They would often sleep on smaller truckle beds that rolled underneath the main bed, or simply on pallets on the floor of the same room, ready to attend to their master's needs at a moment's notice. The most jarring experience for a modern mind, however, would come when traveling. If you stop for the night at an inn, you do not pay for a room. You pay for a space in a bed. You would be directed to a large chamber containing several enormous beds, each already occupied by a number of other travelers. The innkeeper would point you to a vacant spot. You pay the innkeeper for a bed, and he points you to a large mattress already containing a snoring wool merchant and a smelly pilgrim. You get the half that snores slightly less. You would be expected to strip down and climb in next to a complete stranger, a man you've never met and will never see again after sunrise. This communal sleeping was so common that there were unwritten, and sometimes even formally written, rules of etiquette for bed-sharing, a quirky but necessary social grace. You were expected to lie still, to not take up more than your allotted space, and to generally ignore the person next to you. Some conduct guides even offered advice on matters of flatulence or what to do if your bedfellow was a loud snorer. It was a structured social situation, a microcosm of a society where privacy was a rare and generally unvalued commodity. A famous, if slightly later, example that illustrates this culture is the Great Bed of Ware, a massive oak bed built in the late 16th century, now housed in a London museum. At over 10 feet wide, this mainstream historical artifact could reputedly sleep up to 4 couples comfortably, and it became a tourist attraction in its own time, with travelers carving their initials into its posts. Even within the geography of a single bed, a strict social hierarchy was often observed. The position of honor and safety was against the wall or in the center. The head of the household, the lord, or the most important guest would occupy this spot. Status decreased as you moved towards the open outer edge of the bed. Sleeping on the edge of the bed is the medieval equivalent of sitting at the kids' table. It comes with less dignity and a higher chance of being accidentally kicked during the night or catching a draft. What was the emotional impact of such a life, with no physical privacy even in sleep? Historians still argue whether the practice of communal sleeping fostered a deeper sense of familial and communal bonding, security, and intimacy, or if it was simply a practical necessity born of cold and poverty that created underlying tensions, anxieties, and a constant lack of personal autonomy. As you lie there, nestled among the warm bodies of your family, you can feel the rhythmic breathing of your sleeping child on your neck. You are not an individual in a private box. You are one part of a larger, breathing, sleeping organism. It is a profoundly different way of experiencing the night, one that is intimate, warm, and secure, yet utterly lacking in the solitude we now consider essential for a good night's rest. You lie back down in the crowded bed, ready for your second sleep. As you try to find a comfortable position amidst the tangle of sleeping bodies, you become acutely aware of the surface beneath you. It is not a supportive, quiet, or clean surface. You are about to get intimately acquainted with the medieval mattress, a piece of bedding so profoundly uncomfortable by modern standards that it makes a cheap dorm room mattress feel like the pinnacle of luxury. Your bed is not a place of sweet dreams. It is a lumpy, bug-infested straw paillasse. Let's start with the foundation. In a poorer home, there might not even be a bed frame. The mattress could be laid directly on the floor or on a simple platform of woven reeds. If you do have a frame, it's a crude wooden construction. Instead of slats or a box spring, it likely has a lattice of ropes stretched across it, which you have to tighten periodically to prevent sagging. On top of this rope base sits your mattress. It's 100% organic, locally sourced, and gluten-free straw. It also has the comfort level of a bag of pointy rock. This mattress is known as a paillasse, from the old French word for straw. It is, quite literally, a large sack made of coarse, durable canvas or ticking, stuffed with whatever organic material is cheap and plentiful. For the vast majority of the population, as is the case for you, that stuffing is straw or chaff. It's light, it's insulating, but it is not comfortable. It clumps together, creating hard, lumpy ridges and deep, unsupportive valleys. Every time you or one of your many bedfellows moves, the whole mattress rustles and crackles with a sound like a dozen small animals burrowing through dry leaves. The straw also breaks down, turning into dust, and absorbs moisture, sweat, and other bodily fluids, meaning it must be periodically emptied and restuffed with fresh straw to prevent it from becoming a completely solid, rotting brick. As a mainstream historical fact, the quality of your mattress filling was a primary indicator of your wealth and social status. While you sleep on straw, the slightly better off might have a paillasse stuffed with horsehair, wool scraps, or even pea shucks. The absolute peak of luxury, reserved for the highest nobility, was the feather bed. A mattress stuffed with goose or swan feathers was incredibly soft, warm, and astronomically expensive. It was the ultimate status symbol, a cloud of comfort in a hard, uncomfortable world. But your straw-stuffed reality has another feature that the feather beds of the rich only partially mitigated: the ecosystem. Your mattress is not just a bag of straw. It is a thriving multi-species habitat. The straw provides a perfect home for fleas, lice, mites, silverfish, and of course, the dreaded bedbug. They live, breed, and feast within the very thing you sleep on. As you lie in the darkness, you can feel the faint telltale tickle of tiny legs crawling across your skin. The bed comes with a built-in alarm system. The bedbugs will definitely let you know if you've overslept by continuing to eat you alive. The constant battle against insect life is a normal part of your nighttime experience. To combat the smells of musty straw and the general lack of hygiene, and to hopefully ward off some of these pests, you might employ a quirky but common trick. People often mix dried, fragrant herbs into their mattress stuffing. Your paillasse might contain handfuls of lavender, chamomile, meadowsweet, or mint, releasing a faint, sweet herbal scent when you move. It's a primitive form of potpourri, an attempt to make the inevitable stench of your bedding slightly more pleasant. The bedding on top of the mattress offers little more comfort. Your sheets, if you're lucky enough to have them, are not soft, high thread count cotton. They are likely made of coarse, homespun linen or even hemp, a material known as hard sheets. They have the soft, gentle texture of fine grit sandpaper, great for exfoliating while you sleep. Your blanket is a single, heavy covering of rough, undyed wool. It's warm, but it's scratchy, and it carries the permanent earthy aroma of sheep, which only gets stronger when the blanket is damp. Your pillow is likely not a personal item, but a long, hard, cylindrical bolster stuffed with more straw or wool that is shared by everyone in the bed. You lie there, trying to find a hollow in the lumpy straw that vaguely conforms to the shape of your body, feeling the scratch of the linen sheet and the phantom itch of a flea bite. Was this even considered uncomfortable by the people of the time? Historians still argue whether medieval people, accustomed to a life of constant physical hardship, perceived their bedding as uncomfortable by their own standards, their bodies hardened to a degree we can't imagine, or if our modern obsession with softness and ergonomic support creates an unfair bias in how we interpret their lived experience. You, however, having been rudely transported here from the 21st century, can confirm it is profoundly, deeply uncomfortable. Getting a good night's sore, a good half-night's sleep, is a constant struggle against lumps, itches, smells, and scratches. Lying on your lumpy, rustling paillasse, surrounded by your bedfellows, you prepare your mind for sleep. In the modern world, this might involve brushing your teeth, scrolling through your phone one last time, and setting an alarm. But here, in the medieval darkness, preparing for bed is a far more serious and ritualistic affair. Before you can even think about dozing off for your first sleep, you must perform a specific series of prayers and preparations designed to keep you safe through the long, perilous night. Your evening routine begins as the last light fades, often signaled by the tolling of the curfew bell. The first and most critical task is to secure the home. You and your family move with practiced efficiency, closing the heavy wooden shutters and dropping a thick wooden or iron bar across the main door. This isn't just for privacy, it's a vital defense against the real dangers of the night thieves, bandits, or even stray animals. The act of physically sealing your home creates a fragile bubble of safety against the dark and unknown world outside. Next comes the most important chore of the evening: banking the fire. You carefully push the glowing embers of the hearth into a tight pile and cover them with a thick layer of ash. This insulates them, keeping them alive but contained, ready to be revived in the morning without the laborious process of starting a fire from scratch with flint and steel. This is a crucial step. A single stray spark landing on a thatched roof or a dry wooden floor could incinerate your entire home, and possibly the village, while you slept. The final check of the night is to make sure the embers are safely banked, ensuring you only have a 30% chance of dying in a house fire instead of the usual 50%. It's all about managing risk. While tending the fire, you might perform another quirky but comforting ritual. You might have a pot stone or pudding stone, a large smooth rock that has been sitting in the hot coals all day. You carefully retrieve it with tongs, wrap it tightly in several layers of thick cloth, and carry it over to the bed. This primitive hot water bottle will radiate a gentle, precious warmth for hours under the blankets, a small but significant victory against the damp and biting cold of the night. With the physical preparations complete, the spiritual ones begin. This is perhaps the most important part of the ritual. The night was seen as a time of spiritual vulnerability, when the devil and his minions were most active. So, prayer was not just a sign of piety, it was your primary form of spiritual defense. As a family, you might kneel together on the cold floor and recite the Paternoster, the Lord's Prayer, and the Ave Maria. Your personal prayers would follow, asking God and the saints for specific protection. You would pray to be kept safe from fire, from thieves, from sudden death in your sleep, a subitania et improvisa morte, and from the legions of supernatural threats that were believed to stalk the darkness. This practice echoed the formal traditions of the church. As a mainstream historical fact, the last of the canonical hours prayed by monks and clergy each day was compline, or night prayer, which included specific psalms and canticles asking for divine protection through the night. While you don't follow the formal liturgy, the sentiment is the same. You might even recite a popular folk prayer like the White Paternoster, which invoked the Trinity and various angels to guard your bed. Your evening self-care routine involves less scented candles and a face mask and more checking for intruders and praying you don't get eaten by a demon. Finally, you might have a nightcap, a final drink before settling down. This isn't a mug of hot chocolate. It is more likely a cup of small beer, a weak, low-alcohol Alia wine, often heated with spices like cinnamon or nutmeg. This was partly for comfort and warmth, and partly for its soporific effects. Your soothing chamomile tea has been replaced with a mug of warm, slightly sour ale. It doesn't so much help you sleep as it does render you unconscious. Close enough. These drinks were also understood through the lens of humoral medicine. A cold and moist person might be advised to drink something warm and spicy to rebalance their humors for a restful night. Was this extensive routine driven purely by faith and fear? Historians still argue whether the nightly rituals of prayer, securing the home, and tending the fire were driven primarily by genuine, deeply felt piety and terror, or if they also functioned as a kind of structured psychological routinia, medieval cognitive behavioral therapy to calm the mind, create a sense of control in a chaotic world, and prepare the body for rest. Only after the door is barred, the fire is banked, the prayers are said, and the final drink is drunk, can you finally climb into your lumpy, crowded bed. You have done everything in your power to protect your home, your body, and your soul. Now you can only hope it is enough to see you safely through to the waking watch. Having barred the door, banked the fire, and murmured your final fearful prayers, you are finally ready for bed. You stand in the dim, flickering light of the hearth's last embers and begin to undress. You pull the rough, sweat-stained tunic you've worn all day over your head. You untie your breeches and let them fall. You stand there in the chilly air, ready to climb under the covers. You search your mind for the next step in the routine where are your pajamas? You get ready for bed, looking for your favorite pair of flannel pajamas, before remembering they haven't been invented, and your only outfit is a single mud-stained tunic that you'd rather not get even dirtier. The next step is simply this. You get into bed, because your sleepwear in all likelihood is nothing at all. This is one of the most surprising and intimate truths of the past. For the vast majority of people throughout the Middle Ages, and for centuries beyond, sleeping naked was the simple, unquestioned norm. The modern idea of specialized clothing worn only for sleep was a luxury so rarefied as to be almost non-existent for the common person. It wasn't a question of modesty or propriety. It was a matter of pure, simple pragmatism. Consider your wardrobe. You own one, maybe two sets of clothes. They are made of durable but coarse wool or linen, and creating them was a laborious, expensive process, whether spun and woven at home or purchased from a weaver. These clothes need to last. Wearing them for 8 hours every night would subject them to unnecessary wear and tear, and sleeping in the same clothes you worked in all day would make them unbearably filthy. The simplest way to preserve your precious few garments was to take them off at night, fold them neatly to serve as an extra pillow, or place them by the fire to dry and sleep in the buff. It was also a matter of comfort. Medieval clothing was not known for being soft and breathable. A rough woolen tunic could be scratchy and restrictive. Sleeping without it was simply more pleasant and less confining. And perhaps counterintuitively to us, it was also a matter of a certain kind of hygiene. Your straw-stuffed paillasse, as we've established, is a bustling metropolis for fleas and lice. It was far easier to conduct a morning vermin check on your own body than to try and delouse your only set of clothes every single day. Of course, there were exceptions, and these exceptions neatly prove the rule. The concept of clothing made specifically for sleep did exist, but only for the very wealthy. A king, a high-ranking noble, or a fabulously rich merchant might own a nightshirt or a camise. These garments were made of the finest, softest linen, a material that was incredibly expensive. To own a piece of clothing so fine that its only purpose was to be worn in bed was the ultimate symbol of status and luxurious comfort. Most people would never even touch such a fabric in their entire lives. Another common accessory, especially for the wealthy, the elderly, or the bald, was the nightcap. A simple cloth or knitted cap worn to bed served a very practical purpose. It kept your head warm. In a cold, drafty medieval house where most of your body heat escaped through your head, a nightcap was a small but significant comfort. The nightcap is the height of medieval fashion. It keeps your head warm and also serves as a convenient place for lice to shelter from the cold. The visual evidence for this widespread practice is overwhelming. As a mainstream historical fact, countless medieval and Renaissance artworks, from the detailed scenes in illuminated manuscripts to later woodcuts and paintings, depict people in bed. And in almost every case, from kings to peasants, they are shown nude, often wearing nothing but a nightcap. The social aspect of the communal bed also played a role. Sleeping in a propped-up position made it much easier to have a quiet conversation with your bedfellows during the waking watch. Remember that? It also made it easier for the lord or lady of the house to perform one of their most important duties, receiving guests and conducting business from the comfort and status of their great bed. The bed was a seat of power, and it's much easier to look powerful when you're sitting up, not lying down. Sleeping sitting up makes it much easier to suddenly wake up and defend yourself from a demon, or to have a polite conversation with your snoring bedfellow. It's all about efficiency. To help manage this complex arrangement of bedding, some beds had a quirky accessory, the bedstaff. This was a simple wooden pole that could be tucked into holes in the bed frame. Its exact purpose is debated, but it was likely used as a lever to help prop up the heavy layers of mattresses and blankets, to hold back the heavy bed curtains for ventilation, or perhaps as a handle for an elderly or infirm person to pull themselves up into the required seated position. So, was this strange posture purely a result of flawed medical advice? Historians still argue whether the semi-upright sleeping posture was primarily driven by these specific medical theories about humors and respiration, or if it was a practical social habit that developed from the communal, multi-purpose nature of the bed, with the medical justifications simply being created later to support and explain an existing practice. You try to settle into this position, your neck feeling unsupported, your body wanting to slide down the pile of pillows. It feels unnatural, a state of being neither truly seated nor truly lying down. But as you look around the dark room at the other figures propped up beside you, their heads lolling in sleep, you realize that for them, this is the very definition of rest. It is a posture of safety, of social readiness, and of medical prudence. You close your eyes, and as you drift off into your second sleep, you do so not lying down, but sitting up, a sentry guarding your own humors in the long medieval night. You are deep into your second sleep, adrift in the strange, prophetic dreams that this later slumber is supposed to bring. Your propped-up position is feeling almost normal, the shared warmth of your family a small comfort in the vast, cold darkness. The world is silent, peaceful, but then a new sensation intrudes, a sharp, acrid smell that scratches at the back of your throat, a smell that doesn't belong in your small, familiar hovel. It's the smell of smoke, but not the gentle, comforting smoke of a hearth. This is the hungry, angry smoke of a fire that is out of control. The real dangers that lurk in the dark are rarely monsters. They are far more mundane and far more deadly. You are jolted awake not by a gentle stirring, but by a sudden panicked shout from the street outside. Fire! Fire! Wake up! Fire! It might be the voice of a neighbor, or if you live in a larger town, it could be the official night watchman, a quirky but essential figure whose job was to patrol the dark, empty streets, calling out the hour and, most importantly, acting as the town's only early warning system for the greatest peril of medieval urban life. Your highly advanced fire alarm system is your neighbor, screaming. It's effective, but the volume control is a bit sensitive. Panic, cold, and absolute seizes you. Through the cracks in the shutters, you can see a terrifying, flickering orange glow. The crackling sound of burning timber is now audible, and it is horrifyingly close. You scramble out of the communal bed, your nakedness forgotten in the sheer terror of the moment. You shake your spouse awake, gather your sleeping children. The room is already filling with smoke, making you cough, your eyes streaming. The single wooden door, the one you so carefully barred for safety, is now your only escape route from a potential funeral pyre. You wrestle with the heavy bar, your hands fumbling in the dark. You finally get the door open and shove your family out into the chaotic street, the cold night air a shocking contrast to the growing heat inside your home. You have escaped, but you've escaped into a vision of hell. Your neighbor's house is a raging inferno, a tower of flame roaring into the night sky, sending a fountain of sparks onto your own thatched roof. As you watch in horror, a patch of your own roof begins to smolder, then glows, then bursts into flame. This is the most common and most dreaded disaster of medieval life. As a mainstream historical fact, catastrophic urban fires were a regular and devastating feature of towns and cities built almost entirely of wood, plaster, and thatch. Tightly packed houses, open hearths, and a complete lack of any effective firefighting technology created a recipe for swift, total destruction. As you huddle with your family in the pre-dawn chill, watching the last embers of your former home hiss and die, your mind searches for a reason. A stray spark seems too simple, too mundane an explanation for such a devastating catastrophe. A neighbor whispers the word witchcraft, while another makes a sign to ward off evil. In the medieval world, the line between an accident and a malevolent act was vanishingly thin, especially at night. For the night was not just physically dangerous, it was a teeming, active, supernatural realm. You didn't just need to protect yourself from fire and thieves, you had to use charms and prayers to ward off ghosts, demons, and all the other things that go bump. The profound darkness you experienced each evening was not empty. To the medieval mind, it was a porous environment where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds became weak. This was the time when demons, believed to be the literal active agents of Satan on earth, roamed freely. They could tempt you into sin, whisper blasphemous thoughts into your ear as you slept, cause sickness, blight crops, and of course, start fires. Your main nighttime worry isn't whether you locked the door, but whether you remembered to recite the specific incantation that keeps the soul-eating demon from coming down the chimney. Alongside demons were the spirits of the dead. Ghosts were not the translucent, harmless figures of modern cartoons. They were often seen as terrifying, physically present beings returning from the grave to torment the living, seek revenge for a wrongful death, or warn of impending doom. You would hear countless tales of restless spirits haunting the local crossroads or the churchyard after dark. Perhaps the most intimate and terrifying of these nocturnal visitors were the incubus and succubus. As a mainstream historical fact, the belief in these specific demons was treated with deadly seriousness by theologians and common folk alike. The incubus, a male demon, was believed to prey on sleeping women, while the succubus, a female demon, visited men. They would descend upon a sleeper, pressing down on their chest with a crushing weight, paralyzing them, and engaging in a terrifying spiritual and physical assault. That feeling of being awake but unable to move with a heavy weight on your chest, that's not sleep paralysis, a term that doesn't exist yet. That's just Bartholomew, the local incubus, saying hello. He's a bit needy. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in nocturnal demons and ghosts was a literal interpretation of the cosmos, a genuine conviction that the world was filled with invisible spirits, or if it also served as a powerful psychological framework for explaining misunderstood phenomena like sleep paralysis. The incubus, sudden infant death syndrome, blamed on demons or changeling fairies, epilepsy, and even just the strange, vivid nightmares brought on by illness or indigestion. Faced with this nightly onslaught of supernatural threats, you had an arsenal of protective measures. Your nightly prayers, as we've discussed, were your first and most important line of defense, but you would supplement these with physical objects and rituals. A crucifix hanging on the wall, a small pouch containing a saint's relic, or a bottle of precious holy water from the church could be used to bless the bed and its occupants, creating a zone of divine safety. Alongside these official Christian protections was a rich tradition of folk magic. You might nail a piece of iron, like a horseshoe, over your door, as iron was widely believed to repel evil fairies and spirits. You might sow specific herbs, like St. John's wort, into your straw paillasse, not for the nice smell, but because it was thought to have potent anti-demonic properties. And for a truly specific threat, you might employ a truly quirky and rather disgusting tool, the witch bottle. If you believed a specific witch was trying to harm you, you could take a bottle and fill it with your own urine, some of your hair and fingernail clippings, and sharp objects like bent pins and nails. You would then seal the bottle and bury it under your hearth. The theory was that the witch's evil magic would be drawn to the bottle containing a piece of you, where it would be trapped and tormented by the sharp objects inside. You prepare your anti-witchcraft device, which is essentially a very personal and pointy cocktail. It's disgusting. But the Homeowners Association has very strict rules about supernatural intruders. Every strange occurrence of the night was viewed through this lens. A sudden nightmare was not just a product of your own mind, it was a direct assault. A creak from the floorboards was not the house settling, it was a restless spirit. The howl of the wind was the cry of a passing demon. Life was a constant, ongoing spiritual war, and the night was the main battlefield. As you sit among the ruins of your home, you might find yourself praying with a new and desperate fervor, clutching a salvaged amulet, preparing for a night of sleep under the open sky, more vulnerable than ever to all the dangers the darkness holds, both real and imagined. After a fitful, terrifying night spent huddled under a salvaged blanket in the shadow of a still smouldering ruin, the first hint of dawn is a welcome sight. The oppressive, monster-filled darkness begins to recede, replaced by a thin, grey, watery light. You have survived the night, both its real and imagined terrors. But this relief is short-lived, because the arrival of the sun signals the start of another, more mundane battle, the medieval workday. There is no gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness here. You are about to discover that the snooze button hasn't been invented yet, and the world has a very loud, very insistent way of telling you it's time to get up. Your first alarm clock is a rooster. As soon as the sky begins to lighten from black to charcoal grey, a rooster somewhere in the village lets out a ragged, piercing crow. It is quickly answered by another, and then another, until the air is filled with their obnoxious, competitive shrieking. Your alarm clock is a rooster, who begins screaming his head off the second the sun considers making an appearance. He does not have a snooze button or an off switch. This is the natural biological signal that the night is over. Close on the heels of the roosters comes the second, official alarm. The heavy bronze bell in the local church tower begins to toll. This isn't the frantic, panicked ringing of the fire alarm from the night before, but a steady, solemn, and non-negotiable summon. This is the bell for lauds or matins, the first of the canonical hours of prayer that structured the entire day. As a mainstream historical fact, these church bells were the communal clock for everyone, marking the hours for prayer and, by extension, the hours for labor. When that first bell rang, it was an announcement to the entire community. Night is over, day has begun, get to work. There is no concept of sleeping in. That is a luxury reserved for the very high nobility, and even they were expected to rise at a reasonable hour to hear Mass. Sleeping in until 7 a.m. is a decadent luxury reserved for kings and people who are currently dying of the plague. For you, a common peasant or artisan, to remain in bed after the bells have rung and the sun is up would be seen as a sign of profound sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins. Your work is tied directly to daylight. Every moment of sun you waste is food you don't grow or work you don't get paid for. So, you rise. Your body is stiff and sore, you are gritty with soot and despair, but you get up. There's no time for a gentle start to the day. The moment you're awake, you're expected to be productive, which for you today mostly involves not being on fire anymore and figuring out where your family is going to get breakfast. The morning routine is one of immediate action. The first task is to rekindle the fire, if you have a new hearth to tend, carefully uncovering the embers you banked the night before and feeding them with kindling. Then comes fetching water from the well, tending to any livestock that might have survived the fire, and facing the immense task of rebuilding your life from the literal ashes. Interestingly, despite the abruptness of the wake-up call, you might not feel as groggy as a modern person jolted from a deep sleep by a blaring alarm. Your biphasic sleep pattern has prepared you for this. Your second sleep was naturally lighter than your first, and your body's internal rhythm is more attuned to the rising of the sun. Waking at dawn feels less like an interruption and more like a natural conclusion to the night's rest. In some larger towns, especially in later centuries as work became more regimented, there was even a quirky profession known as the knocker-upper. This was a human alarm clock, a person paid to walk the streets in the pre-dawn hours, carrying a long pole with which they would tap on the upstairs windows of their clients to ensure they were awake in time for their shift at the mill or the factory. It's a testament to how critically important waking up on time was in a world without personal clock. How did you and your medieval contemporaries feel about this daily, relentless summons to consciousness? Was the first light of dawn a welcome relief from the terrifying darkness, a symbol of safety and a return to the productive world of the living? Or was it a grim daily reminder that another long, grueling day of backbreaking labor was about to begin? Historians still argue whether the medieval peasants' relationship with the dawn was one of grim, reluctant necessity, forcing them into another day of toil, or if there was a more cyclical, accepting view of sunrise as a natural and welcome return to light and life. Standing there in the cold, damp morning air, watching your neighbors begin their own daily routines, you suspect it was a bit of both. You are grateful to have survived the night, to see the sun again. But its weak light illuminates the full scale of your devastation, and you know that the day ahead will be one of the hardest of your life. There is no time to linger on your sorrow. The roosters have crowed, the bells have rung, and the medieval day waits for no one. The trauma of the fire and the loss of your home leaves its own invisible scars. You find that your easy, natural rhythm of sleep has been shattered. When night falls, you lie down on a makeshift bed in a neighbor's barn or a corner of the church. But your first sleep is fitful, haunted by the smell of smoke and the memory of flames. You often find yourself wide awake during the midnight watch, but now it is not a calm, productive respite. It is a time of anxiety and sorrow. Or worse, sometimes you can't fall asleep at all. You have developed a case of medieval insomnia, and the strange cures you might seek for it are a journey into the bizarre world of humoral medicine. In your era, an inability to sleep is not just a minor inconvenience, it's a symptom of a serious imbalance. You might consult a local wise woman, an apothecary, or, if you have the means, a physician. They will explain that your wakefulness is caused by an excess of choler or yellow biliary humor that is naturally hot and dry. This heat and dryness rises to your brain, making it agitated and preventing it from succumbing to the cool, moist embrace of sleep. Therefore, all the remedies will be designed to cool and moisten your overheated mind. The first line of treatment is dietary. The doctor's cure for your sleeplessness is a large bowl of lettuce before bed. Lettuce was considered one of the coldest and moistest vegetables, a powerful sedative. You might also be told to eat cucumbers, purslane, or drink the juice of poppies mixed with water. If it doesn't put you to sleep, you can at least enjoy your new life as a rabbit. When a simple salad fails to do the trick, you move on to more potent herbal remedies. You might be given a tincture of chamomile, valerian, or hopsherbs we still recognize for their mild sedative properties. But the medieval pharmacopoeia had much more powerful and far more dangerous options. This is where you encounter the heavy hitters, opium and mandrake. As a mainstream historical fact, soporifics derived from the opium poppy and the mandrake root were well known to medieval physicians. They were used to treat pain and induce sleep, but their power was terrifying. The apothecary offers you a special sleeping powder made from mandrake. The side effects include deep sleep, vivid hallucinations, and a small chance of waking up next Tuesday, or not at all. The line between a medicinal dose and a lethal one was incredibly thin, and knowledge of dosage was imprecise. Historians still argue whether the medieval use of powerful narcotics like opium and henbane for insomnia was a carefully controlled medical practice administered by knowledgeable herbalists who understood the risks, or a reckless and dangerous game of chance, where the boundary between a sleeping draught and a fatal poison was crossed with terrifying regularity. The cures were not only ingested, they were also applied externally. You might be instructed to anoint your temples and nostrils with a paste made from poppy juice and other cooling herbs. A particularly strange but documented cure involved the fat of a dormouse. You would be told to capture and render the fat from this small rodent, and then rub the resulting ointment onto the soles of your feet before bed, the logic being that it would help draw the excessive heat down and away from your brain. Apparently, the key to a good night's sleep is rubbing rodent fat on your feet. It's unclear if it works, but it definitely ensures no one will want to share a bed with you anymore, which might solve the problem on its own. Perhaps the most potent and quirky of all these remedies was the soporific sponge. An apothecary would take a sea sponge and soak it in a powerful concoction of opium, mandrake juice, henbane, and other narcotic substances. The sponge was then left to dry in the sun, the potent drugs crystallizing within its pores. To use it, the sponge was simply re-moistened with a little water and held under the nose of the sleepless person. The fumes they inhaled were so powerful they would induce a deep trance-like stupor, a state so profound it was even used as a crude form of general anesthetic before major surgery. You lie on your temporary bed, the anxieties of your precarious existence keeping your mind racing. You've tried the lettuce, you've tried the chamomile tea. Nothing works. Finally, in desperation, you unwrap the small, expensive packet of powder the apothecary sold you. You mix the bitter, earthy powder with wine and drink it down. You lie back, and as the powerful alkaloids of the mandrake begin to work on your system, the world starts to dissolve at the edges. The sounds of the night fade. The hard reality of your situation softens into a blurry haze, and you fall, not into a gentle, natural sleep, but into a heavy, dream-filled and dangerously deep stupor. The cure, you realize as consciousness slips away, can be just as frightening as the affliction. You wake from your heavy, drug-induced sleep not to an alarm, but to the dim grey light of morning filtering through the shutters. A deep, aching weariness sits in your bones. The potent sleeping draught did not provide true rest, only a counterfeit oblivion. As you slowly come to your senses, you become aware of the quality of the light and the biting chill in the air. It's late autumn. The days are growing noticeably shorter, the nights longer. This simple observation is a powerful reminder of a fundamental truth of medieval life. Your entire existence, especially your sleep schedule, is not governed by clocks or personal preference, but by the grand, inexorable rhythm of the seasons. In the modern world, your sleep schedule is likely consistent year-round. You go to bed around the same time and wake up to an alarm at the same time, regardless of whether it's June or January. Electric light has flattened the seasons, making every night the same length. But for you, here in the medieval past, the sun is the undisputed master of your time. Your life is dictated by the agrarian calendar, and your sleep patterns shift dramatically between the long, dark nights of winter and the short, frenetic nights of summer. Let's imagine it's the heart of winter. The sun, a weak, pale disk, might not rise until well after 8 in the morning and could set as early as 4 in the afternoon. This leaves you with a staggering 14 or 15 hours of darkness to get through each night. This is when the biphasic sleep pattern is most pronounced and most necessary. It is impossible for you to sleep for 15 straight hours. Instead, you would go to bed very early, shortly after dusk, and have a long first sleep. The waking watch in the middle of the night could last for 2 or even 3 hours. This was the social heart of the winter night. With little farm work to be done, families spent long hours indoors. The midnight watch was a time for storytelling, for mending tools by the firelight, for quiet games, and for huddling together for warmth. Winter is basically a 4-month-long slumber party that you're forced to attend with all your relatives. And you're all trying to avoid freezing to death. The official start of this quiet, dark season was often marked by a quirky but important date in the calendar, St. Martin's Day on November 11th. This was the traditional time for the slaughter of livestock that couldn't be fed through the winter, for the final harvest to be stored, and for the seasonal cycle of outdoor labor to largely cease. The arrival of Martinmas meant the arrival of long nights and a slower pace of life, dominated by indoor activities and a long 2-part sleep. Historians still argue whether the long, dark medieval winter was experienced as a time of dread, scarcity, and confinement, or if it was a welcome, restorative period of communal bonding, storytelling, and rest from the backbreaking labor of summer. Now contrast that with the height of summer. The medieval summer schedule is simple. You wake up before the sun, you work until after the sun goes down, and then you collapse for a few hours. It's a great work-life balance if you don't particularly value life. The sun might rise at 4 in the morning and not set until nearly 10 at night. The period of darkness is short, perhaps only 6 or 7 hours. This is the busiest time of the agricultural year, plowing, planting, weeding, and then the frantic, all-consuming labor of the harvest. During these short summer nights, your biphasic sleep pattern would likely vanish completely. There is simply no time for it. You would work in the fields until the last possible moment of twilight, stumble home, eat a quick meal, and fall into a deep, exhausted, consolidated sleep. Your first sleep and second sleep merge into one solid block of oblivion. You might only sleep for 5 or 6 hours before the first hint of light, the crowing of the roosters, and the ringing of the church bells would summon you back to the fields. SCR. No, it's summer, when your extended, 2-part sleep with a thoughtful intermission gets replaced by 4 hours of panicked unconsciousness before the rooster screams. You know it's summer when your extended 2-part sleep with a thoughtful intermission gets replaced by 4 hours of panicked unconsciousness before the rooster screams at you again. There is no time for a leisurely waking watch, no time for prayer or quiet conversation. Summer nights are for one thing only: gathering just enough strength to survive the next grueling day. Spring and autumn are the transitional periods. As the days lengthen in the spring, you would find your waking watch naturally shortening and your bedtime getting later. As the nights draw in during the autumn, you would feel your body reverting to the familiar 2-part rhythm, going to bed earlier and enjoying a longer, more pronounced waking period in the middle of the night. This seasonal rhythm governs your entire being. It affects your mood, your energy levels, your social life, and your very perception of time. You are not a clock-punching individual living in a climate-controlled box. You are an organism deeply and inextricably linked to the natural world. Your body's clock is not the one ticking on a wall. It is the great, slow, powerful clock of the cosmos, marked by the rising and setting of the sun and the turning of the season. Your sleep is not a matter of personal choice. It is a response to the fundamental realities of light, darkness, and the demands of the land. You huddle on your straw pile on the floor of your one-room hovel, the scratchy wool blanket pulled up to your chin. The smoky air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp earth, and perhaps the faint musky scent of the goat you brought inside for warmth and safety. Your bed is less a piece of furniture and more a designated pile of flammable organic matter that you share with your family and a thriving insect community. This is your nightly reality. But to truly understand the world of medieval sleep, we must also see how the other 1% slumbered. Let us for a moment leave this cold floor and travel to the nearby castle to compare the sleeping arrangements of the peasant and the lord. The difference is staggering, a gulf as wide as the social chasm that separates your lives. While you sleep in the main and only room of your house, the lord and his lady retire to a private, or at least semi-private chamber on an upper floor of the castle keep. This room, a sola, is a world away from your smoky hut. The stone walls are not bare but covered with thick, heavy tapestries depicting heroic hunts or biblical scenes, which serve not just as decoration but as crucial insulation against the bone-chilling cold of the stove. There is a dedicated fireplace, larger than your entire dwelling, and the windows, instead of being simple wooden shutters, might even have small panes of expensive, cloudy glass. And in the center of this room, dominating the space, is the bed. It is a masterpiece of furniture, an architectural marvel in its own right. The Lord's bed is so large and ornate, it has its own architectural style and probably requires a permit to assemble. It's a massive 4-poster bed, crafted from heavy, dark, ornately carved oak. It has a full wooden canopy, or tester, above, from which hang thick, luxurious curtains made of velvet or brocade, often lined with fur. As a mainstream historical fact, these iconic bed curtains were not merely for show or for the limited privacy they offered. Their primary purpose was to create a small, insulated room within a room, trapping body heat and keeping out the relentless drafts of a poorly heated stone castle. Now, let's look at the bedding itself. The foundation of this multi-layered sleep system might still be a simple paillasse stuffed with fresh straw, but that is where the similarity ends. On top of that would be a second, thicker mattress stuffed with soft, clean wool or horsehair. And crowning it all, the absolute pinnacle of medieval comfort is the featherbed. This is a deep, pillowy mattress stuffed with thousands of soft goose or swan feathers. To sink into it would be like falling into a cloud, a sensation so alien to your straw pile existence as to be unimaginable. The sheets are not the scratchy hard sheets of your home. They are made of fine, smooth, often bleached linen. The blankets are not one coarse wool covering, but multiple layers of the finest woven wool, topped with a fur-lined coverlet. The Lord's bedtime rituals are also a world away from yours. You might have a heated stone to warm your bed. The Lord gets a servant to warm his sheets with a quirky and ingenious device called a warming pan. This was a metal pan with a long handle and a hinged lid. A servant would fill the pan with hot coals from the fireplace, close the lid, and then slide the warm pan back and forth between the cold linen sheets, chasing away the damp and chill before the lord and lady deign to get into bed. It's the same principle as your pot stone, just with more staff and less risk of accidentally setting the bed on fire. And who sleeps in this magnificent contraption? It is still often a communal affair, but one of a much higher status. The lord and lady would occupy the central, most honoured positions. Their young children might still sleep with them. A particularly important guest, like a visiting duke, might be invited to share the bed as a sign of extreme trust and favour. Personal valets or ladies-in-waiting would sleep on smaller truckle beds at the foot of the great bed, ready to serve at a moment's notice. The stark contrast between your sleeping world and theirs is a constant, tangible reminder of the rigid social hierarchy that defines your life. Historians still argue whether this stark difference in sleeping comfort between social classes, the peasant on a louse-ridden straw pile on the floor and the lord in his curtained, feather-filled fortress was simply accepted as the natural, God-given order of a hierarchical society, or if it was a source of deep-seated, quiet resentment and a tangible daily reminder of profound social injustice. Yet, despite this enormous gulf in material comfort, some fundamental aspects of the medieval night remain universal. The Lord, in his curtained, feather-soft paradise, is still subject to the same profound darkness when the last expensive beeswax candle is snuffed out. His sleep schedule is still dictated by the sun and the season. He still experiences the biphasic sleep pattern, waking after his first sleep into the quiet of the midnight watch. And he still fears the things that lurk in the dark: the assassin, the political rival, the demonic tempter, and the sudden leveling hand of sickness and death. His luxurious bed is a fortress of comfort, but it cannot protect him from the fundamental anxieties of the medieval night. The Lord may sleep on feathers and you on straw, but you both sleep in the same dark world. For centuries, this world of biphasic sleep, dictated by the sun and the seasons, remained the unspoken, universal norm. From the peasant on his straw pile to the king in his great feather bed, the night was cleaved in two by that quiet waking watch. But this ancient rhythm, which had governed human rest for millennia, was not destined to last. As you watch the centuries begin to turn, you all witness the slow, almost imperceptible disappearance of the second sleep, a change driven not by a shift in human nature, but by our newfound mastery over the darkness itself. The change begins subtly in the bustling cities of the 17th and 18th centuries. The first culprit is better, cheaper artificial lighting. Improved oil lamps and more affordable wax candles begin to push back the night, but only for the wealthy. The elites start to stay up later. The evening is no longer just a brief prelude to bed, it becomes a time for socializing. Fashionable people now attend salons, plays, and concerts. Coffee houses, a new and exciting invention, become hubs of nocturnal conversation and commerce. It turns out gossiping about your neighbors is more fun than praying for your soul in the dark. Who knew? With this new nightlife, the old sleep pattern starts to be seen as inconvenient. Going to bed at 8 p.m. is no longer practical if you want to be seen at the opera. The first sleep is pushed later and later, towards 10 or 11 p.m. This, in turn, squeezes the waking watch. that once valued hour of quiet contemplation becomes a frustrating interruption. The idea of sleeping in one solid, uninterrupted block begins to take hold among the fashionable and the urban, a sign that you are a modern, productive person with a busy social calendar. But the final death blow to the second sleep comes with the smoke and thunder of the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. This is the mainstream historical force that reshaped every aspect of human life, including how we slept. First, gaslighting illuminates city streets, making them safer and more navigable after dark. The ancient, terrifying character of the night begins to recede. But more importantly, the factory whistle replaces the sun as the master of time. The new industrial economy demands a synchronized, disciplined workforce. The factory owner needs you to be awake, alert, and at your machine for a 12-hour shift that starts promptly at 6 a.m. He cannot have his workers feeling drowsy because their second sleep was interrupted. That strange, thoughtful period of midnight consciousness is not considered an asset to industrial production. A single consolidated block of sleep becomes an economic necessity, a way to wind the human machine up for another grueling day of labor. Finally, the invention and proliferation of the electric light bulb in the late 19th and early 20th centuries brings the revolution into every home. For the first time in human history, the night can be banished completely at the flick of a switch. The long, 14-hour winter night, which had for eons necessitated a segmented sleep, simply ceases to exist. We now live in a world of perpetual artificial day. By the early 20th century, the cultural memory of biphasic sleep is almost entirely erased. The old way of sleeping is so forgotten that when people naturally experience it waking up for an hour or so in the middle of the night, they view it as a medical problem. They go to their doctors complaining of insomnia. And the doctors, equally unaware of this historical norm, prescribe sleeping pills and therapies to fix a sleep pattern that was perfectly healthy and normal for their ancestors. So the next time you wake up at 2 a.m. and can't get back to sleep, don't panic. You're not an insomniac, you're just experiencing a nostalgic, vintage-style medieval sleep pattern. Was this change a good thing? Historians still argue whether the transition to monophasic sleep was a net gain for human productivity and progress, allowing for the creation of our 24-hour modern world, or if it was a significant loss that has contributed to widespread sleep disorders, modern anxieties, and a collective disconnect from our own natural biological rhythms. Standing on the precipice of the modern age, you look back at the world of dark, quiet nights and segmented sleep. You have witnessed its disappearance, the slow, quiet death of the waking watch, squeezed out of existence by the bright, relentless, and clock-driven world we have built. The way we sleep now is not the way we were built to sleep, and the memory of that older, stranger rhythm is a final, faint echo from a time when the night still held its power. And so, our long journey through the strange, dark nights of the Middle Ages comes to a peaceful end. The flickering candlelight, the rustling straw, the deep velvet blackness outside the shuttered window, all of it can now recede, fading into the soft, quiet comfort of your own modern bed. The anxieties of that time, the fear of the dark, and all it held, both real and imagined, can dissolve as you settle into a space of profound safety and tranquility. Let the memory of that segmented sleep, with its midnight waking watch, serve as a gentle reminder of how deeply our lives are shaped by the world around. But for you now, there is no need for a first or second sleep. There is only the promise of one long, continuous, and unbroken night of rest. The story is over. The historical explorations are done. All that is left is the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breathing, a quiet anchor in the peaceful sea of the present moment. Let the weight of the day melt away and allow the darkness of your room to be a comforting blanket, not a source of fear. It is time for your own uninterrupted slumber. End of script. Sweet dreams. The Great Fire of London in 1666 is the most famous example, but history is littered with the ashes of countless other forgotten towns. You can hear the church bell beginning to ring frantically, not with its slow, measured toll for prayers, but with a wild, clanging alarm. People are pouring out of their homes, some screaming, some trying to save what meager possessions they can, others simply standing stunned, illuminated by the terrible orange light. A line of men is already forming, a bucket brigade stretching from the town well to the fire. They pass wooden buckets of water hand to hand with a desperate urgency. The bucket brigade is doing a great job of heroically making one small part of the inferno slightly damp for a few seconds. It's a valiant effort against an impossible foe. The small splashes of water that reach the blaze turn instantly to steam, having no effect on the roaring heart of the fire. You might have a moment to dash back inside to grab a precious tool or a small coffer with your few savings, but it's a deadly gamble. The smoke is now a thick, black, choking cloud. The heat is unbearable. The sound of the burning roof above you is like a continuous thunderclap. You retreat, gathering your shivering family, and watch as your home, the tiny, fragile sanctuary you so carefully secured against the night, is consumed by the flames. In the aftermath of such a disaster, the question of blame would inevitably arise. Was it an accident, a stray ember, or was it arson? Was it the work of God, a punishment for the town's sins? Or was it the work of the devil? This is where the line between real and supernatural dangers blurs. But the immediate danger was all too real. Historians still argue whether the primary source of nocturnal anxiety for medieval people was the fear of supernatural forces like demons and ghosts, or the more tangible and statistically probable dangers of house fires, burglary, and violence. Standing here, watching your entire world turn to ash, the argument feels rather one-sided. By dawn, the fire has burned itself out. A large section of your village is a smoking, blackened ruin. You are left with nothing but the clothes on your back, if you even had time to grab them, and your family. On the bright side, you no longer have to worry about the bedbugs. On the other hand, you also no longer have to worry about the bed or the house. The night has proven that even when you survive until morning, there might be no morning left for you to enjoy. This casual nudity becomes even more startling when you remember the communal bed. You are climbing into bed naked, next to your naked spouse, your naked children, and, if you were at an inn, a completely naked snoring wool merchant. This really helps you bond, and also helps you learn exactly how many ribs you can count with your elbow while trying to maintain a respectable distance. This practice points to a profoundly different cultural understanding of the body and modesty. But what if there was an emergency? A quirky bit of bedtime kit was the night rail or night mantle. This was simply a large robe or cloak kept by the bedside. If you were awoken by a fire alarm or the sounds of an intruder, you could quickly throw it over your shoulders for a bit of instant covering and warmth before dealing with the crisis. So, was the medieval world simply less prudish than our own? Historians still argue whether the casual communal nudity of the medieval bedchamber indicates a truly different, more naturalistic understanding of the human body, free from our modern anxieties, or if the very strict social and religious rules about modesty and exposure that govern daytime life were simply relaxed out of pure, practical necessity within the private or semi-private confines of the home at night. Whatever the reason, this is your reality now. You slip between the scratchy linen sheets, your bare skin shocking against the initial cold. You pull the heavy, sheep-scented wool blanket up to your chin, your only covering. You are warm. You are secure in your barred home, and you are completely, unremarkably naked, just like almost everyone else in the sleeping world around you. Now that you're settled in your crowded, communal, and naked state, you adjust your position for the night. You don't, however, lie down flat on your back or curl up on your side as you would in your modern bed. Instead, you do something that feels completely counterintuitive to a good night's rest. You prop yourself up. You are about to adopt the strange, semi-upright sleeping posture that was favored by medieval people for centuries. In a well-to-do household, the bed would be piled high with pillows, and most importantly, one or two large, firm, cylindrical cushions called bolsters, which would be placed against the headboard. You would lean back against this formidable stack, your head and torso elevated at a significant angle, almost as if you were resting in a modern reclining armchair. Your bed has more pillows than a modern home decor store. They aren't for comfort though, they're structural. It's less a bed and more of a pillow fort. Even in your more humble peasant dwelling, you would use your folded clothes or a smaller, harder bolster stuffed with straw to achieve a similar, if less luxurious, propped up position. Why on earth would people sleep like this? The answer lies not in comfort, but in the prevailing medical theories of the age. Medieval medicine was dominated by the ancient Greek theory of the four humus blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was believed to be a state of perfect balance between these four fluids, and illness was the result of an imbalance. Everything you did, from what you ate to how you slept, was thought to affect this delicate humoral equilibrium. It was widely believed that lying down flat was dangerous. Physicians taught that in a horizontal position, the body's humors could shift in hazardous ways. The heat from your stomach, where digestion was taking place, could rise and dangerously overheat your brain. More alarmingly, it was thought that lying flat could cause blood and phlegm to rush to your head and into your lungs, leading to suffocation, strokes, sleep apnea, or what they might have simply called a sudden nocturnal death. The doctor warns that lying flat could cause all your vital fluids to rush to your head and kill you. It's a wonder anyone survived the invention of the flat mattress. To a medieval mind, sleeping in a semi-upright position was a sensible, preventative health measure, keeping the head elevated and safely away from the potentially treacherous movements of the body's internal fluids. This practice is a mainstream historical fact, supported by a wealth of visual evidence. If you look at medieval and Renaissance art depicting people in bed, they are almost never shown lying flat. They are consistently illustrated as being propped up on a mountain of pillows and bolsters, whether they are sick, sleeping, or even receiving visitors. The bed was not just for unconscious slumber. It was a living space, and this posture facilitated its multiple uses.